Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Welcome to another episode of Redefining Midlife. This episode may be one that makes you rethink your relationship with alcohol. For many women, including myself, alcohol has been a part of our lives for decades. For me personally, I was a bit of a party girl, so alcohol was a big part of my later teenage years and throughout my 20s. I've always loved having a drink of alcohol, although as I've become older, it hasn't really loved me back, and I'm finding that I'm drinking far less than I ever have before. And I really must admit, I'm feeling better for it. Prioritising our health and wellness in this stage of life can mean changing old habits. Now today my guest is Sarah Connelly, and I met Sarah through a social platform called Clubhouse a couple of years ago. Sarah is a coach and educator specialising in alcohol-free living. She has over 25 years of business experience and 14 years as a company director, as well as being busy mum, wife, explorer, and a former grey area drinker. After the death of Sarah's father and her own eye-opening journey going through alcohol-free in 2019, she became fascinated with how to help others like her that were questioning their relationship with alcohol. Sarah now works with both men and women who believe that alcohol could be an inhibitor to living extraordinary lives that they know that they're capable of living. In this episode, Sarah and I chat about the concept of grey area drinking, and she shares her personal story about her relationship with alcohol with us, as well as giving us many moments to rethink about why we actually drink alcohol. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
We can't create change unless we're really honest with where we're at. And this is where you can help people who you feel are struggling, is to gently encourage conversation, because they might, if they feel comfortable and not judged, they might just start to open up. It's a very lonely place when you're struggling with a substance. And like I said, it doesn't have to be that they're rolling around in the gutter. It could be somebody you know, someone close to you. And allowing them to speak about it without judging them, with compassion, and allowing them to be honest. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, as soon as I said the words, I started to make the change. So speaking the words out loud, whether it's to a GP, a friend, a partner, can be the pivotal moment. I know it was for me when I said it to my GP, where the honesty really lands and you know that something needs to be done.
So the idea of a standard drink and how sometimes we can be deceived. We're thinking we're having a glass of wine as one standard drink, whereas sometimes...
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish I had an example of a glass of wine here, like a proper... I used to pour a glass of wine and I worked out that it was about 2.5 standard drinks. And so many people I know, and me included, would be, I'd only had a glass. I only had a glass, and it was actually 2.5. So I recently wrote a blog about this because I hadn't told anyone how much I was drinking. I used to say to the question, drinking too much for me, because I didn't want anyone to have a benchmark where they went, oh, well, I'm not drinking that much, so there's nothing wrong with me. So I did an exercise and I actually worked it out. And I worked out that I think it was 2 bottles of wine over the weekend, 2 glasses of wine a night during the week, give or take. And then I bumped it up a little bit to include my denial. And I got to 36 standard drinks a week.
Wow.
36 standard drinks a week. Now, that's what most of people I know drink and don't think they have a problem. And that's because the glass of wine is actually 2.5 glasses of wine. The spirit measure is actually 2 spirits. And I was really shocked because 36 units of alcohol is enough to kill you in about 3 seconds. So if you drank that neat, you'd be dead. And I was drinking it every week. Now, if you think about it, you know, you go out to a restaurant one night, you drink a bottle of wine, but with you and your husband, you might have a second one. Then, you know, during the week, a couple of glasses here, a couple of glasses there. Friday night, you might have a few more. That's all we're talking here. There's no vodka. There's no scotch. It's just, for me, it was just wine. So really, if people actually paid attention to how much they're drinking, it would be quite shocking. Like I say, it was enough to kill me if I drank it neat. So in terms of what's safe, as I say, that WHO says nothing is safe. But if you are somebody that can happily have a glass of champagne at a wedding, have a glass of wine once in a while, 1 a week, 2 a week, there's no issue there. But if you're somebody that starts to feel at a certain time in the day, it's time for a wine, and then that wine turns into 2 wines, and that wine turns into 3 wines, then you have to start really looking at what's going on. Because it is about health, not just bodily health, but mental health. And physically, it really does start to take its toll. My dad didn't die of alcoholism, but there is no doubt that the amount of alcohol he drank in his lifetime cut it short, no doubt. So finding what it is that is going to compel you to make a change is really important. For me, it was my kids, was my self-respect, it was the need for peace of mind. And when I work with my clients, we work on what is it that's going to be enough for you to want to make the change. The why, I'm sure Joe talks about the why in other aspects, but the why is absolutely crucial. It needs to be enough to create lasting change. In terms of suggestions around modifying drinking habits, there's a movement called the mindful drinking movement, which is teaching people to be more mindful about how they're consuming alcohol. And it's actually a really great way to start to modify ingrained habits, because you're not saying, I'm never going to drink again, which is terrifying. I certainly didn't say that when I quit. I just thought I'd do it for a couple of weeks, and I did it for a month, and it just went on and on and on. But modifying and being mindful, which means just taking time to really pay attention when you're drinking. I actually found that with red wine, it was disgusting when I paid attention to it. I smelt it. I really, took my time with it. And I'm like, really? And my friend used to laugh because she used to say, whenever you drink red wine, you make this really funny face. And I was like, it's because it's disgusting. But I persevered. And we do persevere. That's like we persevere with cigarettes and coffee. I mean, coffee, I love coffee, but it tastes, if you really think about it, the first time you taste coffee, it's gross, but we persevere. It's the same with alcohol. I mean, we now think that there's, all these subtle flavors in Scotch, and it's like, no, Scotch is foul. Sorry, that's my personal opinion. So really pay attention to the taste. Drink slowly, put the glass down in between sips. Make sure you're only pouring a standard measure, which is 150 mils, not 350 mils, which was what I was doing. And give yourself targets. If it is alcohol is something you're concerned about, then set yourself targets. So I'm going to have 5 drinks this week, or whatever it might be. Make it 2 less than what you normally have. Incremental baby steps, rather than trying to create massive change all on your own, which is terrifying and really only lasts for about a week. So you're mature, intelligent, smart women, and we know how to do things well. So trust yourselves, be honest with yourself, and take the time to create little baby steps so that you can create change over a certain period of time. And you might find that as you really pay attention to what you're drinking, and again, I know this isn't for all of you, but if anyone or someone you know, is just to do it with compassion. And there's a difference between compassion and letting yourself off the hook, unfortunately. We have to be kind to ourselves, but we have to be honest. And so if alcohol is something you want to pay attention to, set yourself some little goals, start to pay attention, ask yourself questions. How do I feel at the end of this glass of wine? Do I really enjoy that kind of buzz? Is it a feeling I enjoy? What we would do normally is just have another glass and keep going. Just as a little bit of interesting information, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain, which is the smart one, makes the decisions, we call it the executive part of the brain, is the first part of the brain that switches off the minute you take a sip of alcohol. Gone. And we go straight into our primitive brain, which is, oh, give me more, give me more, give me more. So it's good to know that, because when we start to drink alcohol, all of our executive functioning goes offline. That's why we lose control. That's why we can't stop. That's why we do stupid stuff when we're drunk, because that part of the brain isn't working. So alcohol-free alternatives is something that I explored for about 2 years. I created an Instagram page and posted on Instagram for a while about all the different alternatives that I discovered. And there is now, for those of you that don't know, there's a company called Sans Drinks, which is SANS drinks.com.au, who have the widest range of alcohol-free alternatives you could find. Actually, and they deliver Australia-wide. I have nothing to do with them. I just know that they're a good place to go. And also Dan Murphy's are getting a lot better. Woolies and Coles are starting to stock alcohol-free alternatives. I found it really helpful in the first 6 to 8 months because I felt included. I felt I didn't have to explain myself. I just enjoy alcohol-free champagne and wine when I was out. I took it to restaurants. I called ahead, asked if I could BYO. And it made me feel like I wasn't giving up as much as I perhaps thought I was going to have to. They're also, as I say, a lot of my friends now, they'll drink on the weekend, but then during the week, when they just feel like having a drink, they will use an alcohol-free wine. What that does for them is it's the ritual. It's like any addiction, there's a ritual behind it. They pour the glass, they sit down, they take a deep sigh, they have a drink. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for a change of state. And we don't need the alcohol for that. We can create that experience with an alternative and a long, deep breath, where we come into our parasympathetic nervous system, we rest and we relax. And a lot of times that's why people drink, is because they want to relax after a stressful day. And alcohol-free alternatives can be a really great way to recreate that ritual without having to use the alcohol. Or you can go meditate. But there's always something that you can do to change your state, which is actually what we're trying to do when we're drinking.
Can those alternatives be triggering for some people?
Yes. So for some, I know quite a few people who reached a really severe level of addiction. The alcohol-free alternatives trigger them to want to drink the real thing, because what they're looking for is the hit of the alcohol, not the taste and experience. So I err with caution for anyone that's really struggling. I waited about 3 months before I tried any, because I just wanted to get the whole thing out of my system. And for me, it worked a treat, absolute treat. For some people, it can cause them to run to the bottle and buy the real thing. So it's definitely not for everybody. But for those of us in the grey area, I think it can work really nicely as an interim, or a way to really just cut back on the amount of actual alcohol we're consuming. As an added bonus, there are a lot less calories in alcohol-free wine. So you're consuming probably a bottle of alcohol-free wine would be equivalent to 1 glass of real wine in terms of calories. And you don't go out and eat at McDonald's the next day when you're hungover, which also cuts back the calories. Yeah, I think that's alcohol-free alternatives covered. Yeah.
Can you talked earlier before about the change in the brain, the dependency on the body, the fact that the World Health Organization now says no alcohol. Can you just nail down some of the main effects that alcohol could have on a woman's body?
Sure.
Or anybody, but in particular women, especially as they start to age more.
Yeah, I mean, basically the worst is cancer, throat cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer. Alcohol is on the list of substances to avoid from the World Health Organization to reduce the chances of getting cancer. We don't talk about that, but it's on there. It really does have a massive contribution to cancer. Breast cancer, I mentioned, particularly after 45, 35% increase in chance of getting breast cancer if you're drinking too much. Putting weight on, again, gets worse as we get older. The ethanol turns into fat, basically. So it puts weight on us, which causes heart problems. We can get heart disease, high cholesterol. Somebody mentioned reflux, which is a big thing. You can start to really struggle with reflux, acid in the stomach, causing problems in the throat, leading to throat cancer. I mean, it's horrible to list all of these things, but it's aging. It's really aging. If you're interested in that, it certainly dries out our skin, creates wrinkles, makes us look older than we are. The brain gets affected. So any damage from alcohol cannot be reversed. If you've ever seen a scan of a brain of an alcoholic, it's horrifying. There's just holes all over it. The grey matter is so minimal. And this is why they lose their intelligence. They lose their ability to discern the difference. That's why they become completely obsessed with alcohol. And it can't be reversed. So that's pretty sobering. No pun intended.
No pun intended.
I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed what you had to say, because I think it's I've definitely had a problem over the years. And I think when I was living by myself overseas for a long time, I think I got to at least a bottle of wine a night before I realised, and the thing for me was all the clinking of the bottles when I was taking them down to the rubbish. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I've had that much to drink. So thanks so much for the name of that site, because the non-alcoholic wine has been something that I've been thinking about for a while. And having a young teenager in the house who's just got up, it's been something I've been looking at for a while, because, when they see that there's a bottle in the fridge, there's always that temptation as well. So not only for myself, but also for having a teenager in the house. It's great. But yeah, I really enjoyed what you had to say. It's had a big impact on me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And I think it's wonderful to think about the children. I also have a teenage boy. He's fascinated by what's happened in my life, and I've been very vocal with him about how I've given up alcohol, and that is another big why, to be able to show our children. I mean, I grew up seeing alcohol day in, day out. My parents couldn't wait for me to have a glass of wine. It was like as soon as I was 18, it's like, come on. So it's a very different generation, and the research is telling us that the younger people, that sort of 21 to 25, are drinking way less than my generation, which is wonderful. They might be doing other things. That's the only trouble. But the alcohol is not something that they're turning to. And I think showing your son that there's alcohol-free alternatives, and creating, if you need to, a ritual to show him that that's how you relax now is wonderful. Whether it's with a cup of tea or a glass of alcohol-free wine, but that you don't need to include ethanol in that ritual is a great thing. So I think that's wonderful.
Okay, I'll tell you about my little wake-up call. When the boys were at primary school and early high school, I used to go to a friend's house with the boys, and they'd play together after school every afternoon, or at least 3 times a week. And every time we would have a drink while we were there. And my wake-up call was when my youngest to my GP, Mummy and Mrs. So-and-so drink rum and Coke every day.
So it was when it was.
I mean, we're only having one a day, so it was like 5 a week, but the kids were noticing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that was mine.
Yeah.
And I used to think it was funny, and it still is kind of a little bit funny the way it came out, but it's pretty scary too.
Mm.
I think that's one of the big things. It's so wrapped up in everything socially, isn't it? And what you're saying about that first year of, you know, having to go to things where alcohol is central. You know, I mean, I know Joe and I have got a girls' weekend that comes up every year with friends from high school. So what are we, 35 years or something, you know, post high school, and we're getting together. And alcohol will be right at the centre of that, won't it? Bottles and bottles of it.
That's really.
Yeah.
Less so, because I've noticed over the years, with not everybody, but some of us are drinking less.
Yeah.
And it is and I was saying to Sarah earlier, having spent so many decades living in the bush and in quite remote locations, that was a focus of every social occasion. The grog was just endless. And anywhere you went, there was always something to drink. At the end of a hot day of work, you know, you'd always have a cold drink. And my relationship with drinking has changed significantly over the years. And I'm not Pollyanna by any stretch, because I still enjoy having a drink, but it's certainly not with the same frequency or the amount. That's what's really changed. I'm drinking less, and the amount I'm drinking, simply because it makes me feel crappy. Mm-hmm. I feel dreadful. I was saying to Sarah earlier, you know, I have half the amount and I feel twice as bad. So that's my body saying, don't do it. And, you know, we've all got a different relationship with alcohol, whether we don't drink at all, or we drink to excess at different times. You know, I think it's just a matter of, as Sarah said, being mindful on how it affects your body. Mm.
That happened, that was 40 years ago, and I still remember it.
But isn't it
clear as anything?
Yeah, when you think about, like as Sarah was saying, also the units of alcohol, if you count up the units of alcohol that you have, and we're under the assumption I'll just have a glass of wine, that's okay. A glass of wine's not much, because however many standard drinks, you hear that, however many standard. So what is the Australian guidelines? Because I would say they'd be fairly loose.
Well, the guidelines are the guidelines. It's 150 mils is a unit of alcohol of wine. And then I think it's 10 of a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I've got them written down somewhere, but it's not much. Like a unit is not actually.
And is that a day or is that a week? Like,
oh no, so 10 units a week is considered, you know, okay. 10, up to 10 for women, standard drinks. I think it's 14 for men.
Yep.
Which is still, you know, it's a reasonable amount.
You're not going without. But yeah, it's that whole being non-judgmental for yourself and for others around you who are drinking, and showing by example. So if it's not right for you, what are you going to do about it? You know, it's no one's forcing. Well, I'm hoping no one's forcing an alcohol drink into your hand every single day or whenever. Yeah, it's just been a very, very thought-provoking session, Sarah.
Yeah, excellent.
I think just one last thing is that this sort of deprivation mindset is something that's really important to shift if you are, you know, cutting back or giving up. And I encourage all of my clients to go out into the world with a a mindset of I've set myself free. This is an exciting time. This is not a time for me to stay at home and go, oh, I'm not drinking anymore, so my life is over. But to actually see it as a whole new beginning, to go out into the world as a non-drinker and show other people. Sometimes I'll go out with the mindset of I'm going to be the funnest person in the room as a non-drinker, and take that with me so that I'm not seen as, oh, we don't want Sarah there, she doesn't drink anymore. And I want to be there. And just one other thing is, you talk about girls' weekends away and things like that. What's interesting when you're not drinking is you've become very discerning about who you want to spend your time with, who you want to talk to, who actually really fills you up, who makes you feel good about yourself. Because I used to spend so much time with people that bore the pants off me now. So I was getting through it with my drinking. I was drinking to get through these situations, not to actually really enjoy them. So that's also another really, it's hard at first, but then it becomes really exciting because you find other things to do. I'm now studying philosophy, which is much more rewarding than going and sitting in a pub listening to people bang on about their crappy husbands. So who knew? Who knew?
I don't know. I know I sing and dance much better with a couple of drinks.
You think you do?
Oh, I know I do.
That's...
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.